Thank you, Misty. Appreciate it. Happy to be here again with everybody. I'd like to start off today with a quick little poll question. Let's practice using those hands. And what I'd love to have you do is let me know if you attended my last presentation. So give me a little hand. Okay, we got quite a few here. All right, I'm just gonna scroll through here and see. Yeah, okay, great. So it's not a requirement that you had, participated in that. I just like to kind of know, so I know how much information that you want and a little bit of background there. So today we are going to talk about how you can tap your way to less stress. So what do I mean by that? This is what I mean. Have you ever seen anybody do this? Looks a little strange, doesn't it? Yeah. And it feels a little strange when you start to do it. However, this little technique that I'm going to show you today and explain about makes a huge, huge difference in reducing stress. This is a technique that has been used by kids in class. Teachers use it with their kids in classrooms to help them calm down and to focus. Veterans, they've done studies that have helped veterans with PTSD. Using tapping techniques. Also, athletes use it for performance, and it can even be used for things like if you have a fear of flying or other phobias. So there are lots of gradations in how this technique is used. I'm here today to teach it to you as a self-help tool. That's how I use it in my practice, and where I think it has the most immediate availability for people. I want to empower you to have another tool to help manage your emotions and your stress levels, especially given everything that's going on in our world right now. Let's just face it, life is stressful anyway, not to mention everything that we have going on in our current world and country and community. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is obviously this, how you can use tapping to tap your way to less stress. But I want to explain to you a little bit about what it is exactly, how it works, and then most importantly, how do you use it in your day-to-day life? So I'm going to walk us through those three areas. And I'm going to start first off by let's just do some tapping so that you really get a sense of what it is that we're talking about today, beyond just watching me tap around on my face. So it's funny, I have actually seen a few people out in the world doing this. There are some ways to do it a little more surreptitiously, but I like to teach it just the basic way, because usually you can find a quiet spot to do it if you're feeling self-conscious. So what we're going to do is a really basic thing to do here for using tapping that pretty much everybody can relate to. Okay, we're going to talk about restricted breathing. So you've probably noticed that when you get stressed, your breathing gets more shallow. And if you were with us last time, we talked a lot about the fight, flight, or freeze response, and how when we're in that freeze mode, our breathing gets very shallow because we don't want to be seen, right? It goes back to our days of trying to evade predators when we were living more out in the wild. And so we had to breathe really shallowly so that that wild animal wouldn't think that we were dinner. Okay, so when we get stressed and we can't run away from the problem and we can't fight our way out of the problem, because most modern problems are not conducive to those responses, what we do is we go into freeze. So having shallow breathing is a very, very common reaction to stress. So it's a nice one for us to work with here. So what I'd like you to do is I'm going to show you how to take a nice deep breath. We're going to do it kind of the same way together. Then we're going to assign it a number. We're going to do some tapping, and then we'll do the same process for taking a nice deep breath and assign it a new number and see what happens. All right, you ready? Okay, let's do this. So in order to make sure that we're getting a nice full breath to begin with and have a good way of gauging the difference for ourselves, what we're going to do is I'm going to have you bend over, just all the way down, touch your toes. You can do this sitting or standing, doesn't matter. You're going to bend all the way over, hang over, take a couple of nice deep breaths, and then all the way up and down. Okay, so now you've seen what we're going to do. We're going to actually do it. Actually, before we get started, did you bring your hand sanitizer? Did everybody sanitize their hands? I already did once, but I'll do it again here. We are, again, going to be touching our faces. So in the world of COVID, let's make sure that, that we're not transmitting anything by accident. Okay, so hands are sanitized. We're good to go. We're going to do that breath. So ready? I'm going to have you bend over. Whether you're sitting or standing, you're going to bend over, take a couple of nice deep breaths while you're folded over. Another one. And then when you're ready, on the inhale, come up and bring your arms all the way up and down. And now assign that breath a number. So 0 is the most it's very, very good breath. 10 is a very constricted breath. All right, so if you're feeling really constricted, you're going to be up in a 7, 8, 9, 10. If you're breathing free and easy, it's going to be down near more of 1, 2, or a 0. Okay, so you got your numbers? All right, if you need to do it one more time, if you're not clear, go ahead and take a moment to do that. So you're going to breathe up, assign the number. Okay, so 10 is very constricted, 0 is free and easy. Now that you have that number, just kind of file it away, and we're going to do the tapping. So the points that we have, and I'm going to show them to you a little bit closer in an image later, but you can see here just by looking at me that we're tapping at the beginning of our eyebrow, the side of our eye, underneath the eye, underneath the nose, under the chin, on the collarbone, under your arm, and on top of your head. Okay, so we're going to start with tapping on the karate chop point. This is the setup. So repeat after me. Even though I have this restricted breathing, I'm okay and all is well. Even though I have this restricted breathing, it's hard to take a full breath. My chest feels tight, but I'm okay and all is well. Then we do it a third time. Even though I have this restricted breathing, my chest feels tight. It's hard to get a full breath. I'd like to breathe more easily, but I'm okay and all is well. Now we go around to these points with a reminder phrase, and we just keep talking about the problem. So at the beginning of your eyebrow, this restricted breathing. If at any point you feel like you need to take a deep breath, go for it. That's your body talking to you. Come to the side of your eye. It's hard to get a full breath. Underneath the eye, this restricted breathing. Under the nose, my chest feels tight. Under the chin, the lip, this restricted breathing. On the collarbone, that little knobby part there. Hard to get a full breath. Underneath the arm, this restricted breathing. And the top of your head, it's hard to get a full breath. And then we do the wrists together, this restricted breathing. All right, now pause. Take a nice deep breath, just sitting here. And now we're going to do that same breath that we did before. So go ahead and bend over, head down towards your feet. Take a couple of nice breaths down low. And when you're ready, inhale, rise up, let your arms drop, and now assign a number to that breath, 0 to 10. 10 is really constricted, 0 is clean and clear, easy breath. All right, everybody have a number? Great. So now what I want you to do is compare the first number to the second number. So ideally, you would have gone from, say, an 8, really restricted, down to maybe a 6 or a 5. All right. Sometimes it doesn't change for people. Sometimes it goes up a little bit, usually because you're newer to it, you're a little self-conscious. So I'm going to check out our little hands here again, and I would love for you all to, if you saw your number improve, give me a raised hand, if you would, please. All right, great. So we're seeing a lot of them, and this is just a really straightforward way of doing it. Nothing fancy about it. We're not very specific. That was more of a global tapping. And you'll find with tapping that the more specific you can be, the more effective it is. But doing this restricted breathing is just a great way for you to get a flavor for what it's all about. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go through and let me explain to you a little bit more about what tapping is, how it came to be, the background of it, why it works. It's kind of weird, right? Why does this work? I have to tell you, sometimes I've been doing this for, oh my gosh, over 10 years now. And I still am surprised sometimes when I see a significant shift. I'm like, oh, it worked. And then I laugh because I'm like, well, of course it worked. You know it works, Wendy, but it's still kind of surprising because it seems so simple. I think we're conditioned that things need to be difficult in order to be valuable or to really make a difference. And that's not always the case. So we're going to talk about what tapping is, how it works, and then I think most importantly, how can you use it in your life? So let me share my screen with you here real quick, and let's look at a few slides that I've prepared to walk us through what's going on. So this gentleman here is Roger Callahan. Now, Roger is somebody who started all of this. He is a clinical psychologist and he developed thought field therapy. He was working with different people as a psychologist and was trying lots of different techniques. He wound up creating this thing called thought field therapy, which is the precursor for the tapping that I'm teaching you today. And it's really interesting how he came about figuring out how to do this. Okay, so he has these patients. Well, he had this one particular patient whose name was Mary. This is just a picture representing her. It's not actually of her, but she was deathly afraid of water. Just a huge water phobia. She couldn't be near it. She actually lived in California, could not go to the beach because she would get so anxious and so upset about the water. She'd have nightmares about it. Couldn't fill up the bathtub all the way to take a bath. I mean, a very serious phobia. And Roger Callahan had been working with her for quite a while and was very frustrated. He was having a hard time making any progress with her. And he kept doing all of this research. He was, like we all do in our areas of expertise, we continue to learn and to grow and to look into new ideas. And he had been studying Chinese energy meridians, these pathways of energy that flow through our body and are the foundation for traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture. So one day, he was frustrated. She was not making progress. And he thought, I'd been reading about how and she talked about how she would get this knot in her stomach every time she would think about water. Just her stomach would seize up, just have that feeling that you get in your stomach. So she had this knot in her stomach every time she'd think about water. And he had been studying about Chinese energy meridians and knew that one of the main points, the starting at any point for the stomach meridian in Chinese medicine is right under the eye, one of those points that we tapped. And so he just on a whim said, what, let's just try this. And he had her tap on this point underneath her eye while they talked about her phobia and her fear of the water. And all of a sudden, she was fine. Like, it was the craziest thing. All of a sudden she starts running towards the pool that they've been kind of doing some testing with. And he thought, oh my God, she's going to go, drown herself because she doesn't know how to swim. And she said, no, I'm good. Like, I know what I'm doing. I just don't think I'm afraid of the water anymore. I'm going to go in and dangle my feet in. And she did. And she never had a problem with it again. So he started to explore this. He said, okay, there's something here. And through that, he came up with this thought field therapy. Now, the interesting thing about thought field therapy, other than that it's a little challenging to say, is that it really required the help of a trained mental health professional, because you're actually really somebody trained in Chinese medicine, because you had to very much understand which Chinese energy meridian was involved. They're all associated, I'll explain in a minute, with different organs. So you have to have all this knowledge and then be like, okay, here's the person's problem that relates to this meridian and that meridian and maybe this one. So let's tap on these three. And it was just a more involved process. Well, this other guy came along, Gary Craig. And Gary is, there he is. He is a Stanford engineering grad and was into things like neurolinguistic programming and lots of different self-help modalities and the like. And he said, he used his engineering mind and he said, you know, I think there's an easier way to do this that would be more accessible to people. There are 12 main points to tap. What if we just tapped on all of them? Does it really matter if we're tapping on the ones, only the ones that are involved in the issue at hand? And he realized that there wasn't any problem with tapping on the ones that weren't involved. So why worry about which one is which? Let's just tap on all of them and we'll hit the ones that we need just by dint of doing all of them, right? So Gary Craig is the one who is credited with taking this idea. He called it emotional freedom techniques, or EFT. It's commonly called now tapping or meridian tapping. And he made it very accessible. When he retired back in 2007, he released all rights to tapping and made it open source so that anybody could use these tools and techniques and all of the work that he had done with it to that point. So a lot of thanks go to these two gentlemen for bringing us the idea, and also looking back even further to all of the thousands of years of traditional Chinese medicine that helped us understand about meridians. So that's really what tapping is. What we're doing is we are tapping on the Chinese energy meridian acupressure points. So when you go to an acupuncturist, they put needles in lots of different points on your body that are very, very specific. And acupuncturists, I have wonderful respect for them. They're so knowledgeable. They really know what they're doing. I'm not claiming to have a fraction of the knowledge that they do. What I get is this idea that there are starting points and ending points for all of the meridians, and we can use those with acupressure, so just tapping a little bit of pressure on them to affect some change for ourselves. So this does not replace acupuncture. It's a nice adjunct. It does not replace seeing a mental health professional. It is an adjunct, although there are some mental health professionals who also use this technique. Like I said, I teach it as a self-help tool. So that's tapping. That's basically what it is. So now let's look a little bit more at exactly how and why it works. I think it's really kind of interesting. As a former medical reporter, I'm fascinated by all of this stuff. So I think this is, I kind of geek out on it. So this is an image you can see here of all of the Chinese energy meridians in the human body. And you can see there that in the middle, they've listed all of them. So the two centerline meridians that run all the way up the front of your body and the back of your body, and they come and they meet right here below your nose, and it's the governing and conception vessels. Those are the two that are the main ones that go through. And then we have the 12 principal meridians. So you can see they're named after organs: stomach, spleen, small intestine, heart, bladder, kidney, pericardium, triple warmer, gallbladder, liver meridian, lung, and large intestine. So this is what Roger Callahan was working with. He would say, oh, okay, so we know that stomach meridian is based on wood, because there are all these elements involved in Chinese medicine. So it's this element and it has to do with these emotions. And so we're going to tap on these different meridians. And what Gary Craig did was say, okay, let's find the beginning and ending points, the accessible spots for them. So you'll notice a lot of them are around the head and face. And let's just tap on those. So this is what they look like. For those of you who aren't familiar with Chinese energy meridians, they're really pretty darn cool. You can see how they run up and down the front and back side of the body. They run all the way out and back in the arms and in the legs. So that's why we tap the wrists together at the end, because they all go out through the fingers. So if you tap here on your wrist, you're getting an access point for all of the meridians as well. All right, so now we'll see a little picture here of, and those of you who were with me last time, you've seen this one before. This is the close-up, right? So you can see that you have the points here where we tap at the beginning of the eyebrow. So this is a good way to see exactly, if you weren't clear the first time we did it, these are exactly where the points are, right here at the beginning of the eyebrow on either side, right? And you can see how then the meridian goes up and over the back of the head. Then the side of the eye. So not out here on the temple, right? That's a different point. We're looking right here at the side of the eye, then underneath the eye. This one is that stomach meridian that Callahan's patient Mary used to great effect. Then we come down here to underneath the nose. And you can see how there's this meridian that's coming down here. And then we have the one here below the chin. And then this is too close up, so you can't really see it on there, but on the collarbone, that little knobby part of the collarbone. So when you come down your throat and you have that little hollow, it's on either side of that. And then under the arms, kind of 3 inches down from your armpit, and then the top of the head. So these are all of the points that we're hitting. A lot of people ask me the question, does it matter which side I use? No, you can do just one side. I tend to do my right hand just because that's what I'm comfortable with, but you could easily do them on the left side. You could do both of them, right? You can do both sides, doesn't matter. Some people will do their hand like this on their chest to get both of them. All right. So that is the Chinese energy meridians. Now, what's interesting, though, is that as we come back to this idea of fight, flight, or freeze, and right, we're in that freeze mode, we're kind of stuck. And when we're upset, we naturally have a tendency to touch these very points on our face. Really kind of interesting. So let's check that out. When I learned this, I was really quite fascinated by it. So I went on the internet and found some pictures of people who were upset. And it was interesting when I just typed in to the program that I used to get images, I typed in things like upset, sad, stressed. And all of these were people recognized that, yeah, this is what we do when we're stressed. So you can see that he's touching these points here, he's also touching these here, and he's touching these here, and he kind of is even making contact with the ones above and below the lip. And that's not uncommon. Here's somebody else who I found under a search for stress, right? So he's touching under his eye, he's touching his chin. You might even have one that's over to the side of his eye. This gentleman, these are images that you recognize, right? If you saw somebody who looked like this, you would know, oh, that person is upset or stressed, somehow emotionally upset. He's touching all around his eyes, all of those key points. This woman is touching here, getting a little bit down in here. Probably, we can't see it in the image, but probably her wrist or part of her arm is resting on these points here. So these are points that we naturally go to when we're feeling stressed, when we're thinking, when we're upset, right? Top of the head. Okay, these people all look stressed, don't they? Stressed, upset, emotionally charged. And so this is just pointing out that it's something that we naturally do. We soothe ourselves by touching these parts of our face. And it's interesting to note that they are so closely connected to those Chinese energy meridians. So what's really interesting, I think, then, is to think about, okay, so now we know what those points are, but what happens when we tap on them, right? What actually is happening there? And I will put it to you that it's energy. It's an electrical connection. So I've got a little poll for you here. We're going to get Misty if she could put it up for me, please. We have a poll that I'd like you to take. And there we go. Okay. So which of these organs or systems has or needs an electrical signal? So choose what you think. The nervous system, the muscles, the brain, the heart. What do you think? Everybody get their votes in. We'll give you a little bit of time here. All right. Which of these organs or systems has or needs an electrical signal? All right. Are we ready for the results? All right. So this was kind of a trick question. I have to adapt for doing this remotely. So normally I would just have people raise their hands in a classroom, but so if you were frustrated that you know that it's more than one and you had to just pick one, I get it. I'm sorry about that. But it's actually all of them. So you all are right. Our nervous system definitely has an electrical system. We know that, right? We know nerves, nervous system, electrical signals. We probably learned that at some point in our education through high school, that the brain sends a signal to the nerves. Electrical signal goes out, goes to the muscles so that they can contract or release and they can function. But also think about the brain, right? So the brain, if you have somebody who's in the hospital, they've been in a severe accident, and they're unconscious, they have an EKG, the physicians have an EKG set up to monitor their brainwave activity. And if that's beeping along, okay, we're good. If it goes flatline, they're brain dead, right? There's no getting them back. That's an electrical signal. An EKG is reading the electrical signal of the brain. That's how the brain functions. Same thing for the heart, right? So the heart is also an electrical entity. It requires an electrical impulse in order to be able to contract and pump the blood through the body. And we know things, heart attacks and things like that are from clogged arteries, but we also have things like atrial fibrillation, which is where the firing is all off. The electrical signal is going haywire. And so it's over functioning and causing all sorts of problems. That's an electrical signal that we have going on in the brain. So it's really kind of interesting to think about this idea. I'm going to stop sharing screen sharing. How do I stop you? Oh, there it matches the Better Together logo at the bottom. I couldn't see it there. So we are energy. That's what I'm wanting you to get from this, is that we have electrical signals going throughout our body. They're required for our body to function appropriately. And so you've heard of things like auras and all of that. Those are real electrical signals that can be read. It's the energy output from all of these electrical signals that we have running through our body. There's a cool little device that illustrates this really well. This is called an energy stick. I just got it on Amazon, and it's kind of fun. It's a little more fun in person, but use your imagination and I'll explain to you how it works here, because I think it really illustrates what I'm talking about really, really well. So this is it has an electrical device in here. When it's activated, it makes a sound. There's a metal strip on either side of it. You can kind of see there. It'd help if I hold it against black. There we go. And if you hold on to one piece of the metal and close the circuit, it makes noise. As soon as you let go, it stops. Close the circuit, open the circuit. What's really fun is if you could imagine that all of us who are on this call today, if we were standing in a big long circle, I could take this, hold on to the metal end. I would take my other hand, hold hands with the person next to me. They would hold hands with the person next to them, with the person next to them, person next to them, make a big circle. Everybody's holding hands. And then it comes to my side over here. And instead of holding their hand, I would hand them this. And they would grab the other side, and we would create a circuit of all of those people. That's an electrical current that's running through all of our bodies. We're just connecting them. That's why things like touch feel so good, because you're actually connecting in with another human being. I touched it accidentally. There we go. Okay, so we are energy. It's really, really interesting to understand. It's important to understand that so that you can get the interesting part, which is, how does all of this happen? When we tap on these points, what is happening in our body? Now, there are a couple of different theories on this. One is that and this is the most prevalent one, but we're learning more, and so other ones are coming around. The main one is that it's actually traveling along those Chinese energy meridians. And what's really interesting about the Chinese energy meridians is that modern medicine has tested them. So this has been done for thousands of years throughout China, where they use the meridians for all sorts of health and wellness. You've probably heard of people using acupuncture even to deaden pain, to do surgery. It's powerful stuff, but nobody really ever got how and why it worked. Modern medicine has done research and has found that there is more of an electrical signal along those meridians, that if you go off of them just a hair's breadth, the signal is less. You come on to where they are, it's really strong, and you can find where they are by measuring the electrical activity. Now, where do those go? It's not like there's a nerve that you can look at and, in a cadaver and say, oh, during our medical school training, we're going to pull all this apart and be like, oh yeah, there's the nerve. And that's how the signal gets from the brain to the muscle. That's a nervous system. We can't find an actual physical structure called an energy meridian, but we have evidence that they exist. So there's more research that's being done, more news that's coming out about this. And we're finding that there's also this thing called fascia, which I work with quite a lot in my work doing myofascial release as a massage therapist. And the fascia is kind of like fiber optic cable in the sense that it also conducts electricity. Fascia is a 3D web that covers us head to toe. It goes around every muscle, every organ, every muscle cell, every muscle fiber. It just wraps itself all around. It's connected to absolutely everything in our body. You're probably familiar with things like your plantar fascia. Anybody had plantar fasciitis? Yeah, so you know what that is, right? And that's a strip of fascia that runs along the bottom of your foot, really big, thick strip of fascia that gets restricted. Your IT band, anybody have a tight IT band? I've had that before, right? I have it pretty much all the time. That's another strip of fascia where it's very concentrated, but it actually goes in and around every aspect of our whole bodies, connecting all of it. So there's some thought that the electrical signals that we're tapping into with this meridian tapping actually may be traveling along the fascia, that might be kind of where the meridians live, so to speak. So there's no definitive, we know that they're there. We're not exactly sure where they are, but there's been an interesting bit of research that came out 2 years ago in 2018, and you can look it up in Scientific American, and it's called the interstitium. And there is a group of researchers who want to name the interstitium as an actual new organ in the body. And the whole science behind this is really interesting. I can't find any images that I'm allowed to share with you, and I'm not a good artist, so I couldn't draw it. But basically, it is all of the space between our muscles and our organs and our bones and our nerves and all, just that space. And we never really knew it existed before, because every time we tried to look at it, we had to put it under a slide, or we were looking at a cadaver and there was no moisture. So everything had collapsed. And the advent of new technology has allowed us to look at live tissue in a new way, where we could see that, like, oh, look, there's this like pocket that runs through and around everything. And it has all these little holes in it and space in it that's filled with fluid. And so they think that the interstitium may play some role in all of this as well. So it's all kind of getting figured out right now. The energy meridians, the fascia, the interstitium, are they all one and the same? Are they three separate entities? Are they three ways of looking at the same thing? It's all really quite fascinating, but that's technically how we believe that tapping works. All right, that's your little science class for today. All right, so let's move on to our third point, which I think is really the most fascinating, is how the heck do we use this, right? How does it benefit you? So let's go back to our presentation. So you get that we are energy, right? Y'all with me? We've established that we're, to some degree or another, we are energy. Okay. So this is actually what we do and how we tap. We do what we call the setup. So you remember we did that at the beginning of our time together today. We assess the intensity. 1 is the best, 10 is the worst. Things are most intense at 10, least intense at 1. You want to do an assessment so that you remember, and you can gauge and see if this is actually doing what you want it to be doing. Now, then the second point here is that you continuously rub either these sore spots. You can see that there, if you come to the little V that you can see there in the image on your throat, come down from there about 3 inches and then out to either side 3 inches. That's what we call the sore spot. And if you rub on there on either side, kind of play around and see if you can find in there, it's usually a little tender. There's some congestion there. All right, so you can do that on either side, or you can do what we call the karate chop point. So that's just if I were to try to, break some boards, hi-ya, right? This part, this fleshy part of your arm, your hand. So you could tap here, you can tap there, you can switch between them. If it's getting uncomfortable, you can go from here to here, here to here. Doesn't matter, any of those, whatever feels good for you. Some people don't have the ability to use both hands, so just doing the sore spot. I've done this when I'm driving and I need to tap. I'll keep one hand on the steering wheel and I'll rub here on the sore spot, or I'll take the karate chop point and bang it on the steering wheel to do the tapping. You can be creative. I'll tell you the story of how I did that one time in just a minute. So you're going to continuously rub those sore spots or tap the karate chop point on either hand. And then you're going to go through 3 times explaining what the problem is and confirming that in the big picture, you're really okay. All right, so however you want to language that is fine. Don't get hung up on the language. When I first learned this, I worked with somebody who was fabulous, but I felt like I wasn't doing it right. So I was hesitant to try to do it on my own. And I wasted a couple of years not using a really valuable tool because I was afraid I wasn't going to do it just right. I wasn't going to say the right thing. And there's really no way to do it. You're not going to hurt anything if you do it wrong. The worst that happens is that it doesn't do anything. So why not just give it a try? But if you're a perfectionist like me, I'm just inviting you to try to let go of that perfection and just see how it goes. So you start off with, even though I have, and you describe what the problem is, I'm okay and all is well. So it doesn't, you're just going to say it one time, then you're going to say it a second and a third time. And usually what I do is I just kind of talk about what's going on, what I'm present to in the moment, what the issue is. And the reason that we do this is because it's like, you're drawing your system's attention to, here's the problem, you're highlighting the problem. This is what I want to focus on. This is what I want to fix. So I liken it to when you're trying to change something in a Word document on your computer. You can't just say, sitting in your, at your desk, you're like, oh, I think I need to change the language in that document I wrote yesterday, and then have it be done. Right? I mean, you have to get on your computer, you need to open up Word, you need to go find that document, then you need to go and find where in the document the change needs to happen, and then you highlight and erase that, right? That's essentially what we're doing here, is you're highlighting so that we can remove the thing that's the issue. And then you're just reassuring yourself that, yeah, even though this is up for me right now, I'm safe, I'm okay, all is well. So however you want to language that is just fine. And then once you've done that, so 3 times through there, then we do what we call the sequence. So this is what Gary Craig came up with, this whole system where you're going to tap. It says 5 to 7 times. I don't count. I think when you're counting, it kind of just distracts you. Just do it for a little while. Do it till you feel like moving on. All right. I usually use 2 fingers just because then I'm sure that I'm hitting the meridian point. One or the others is probably going to get it. And then you're going to, as it says here in the second bullet, repeat a reminder phrase of the issue, or just continue to talk about the issue. I'm going to give you some examples of this here in a second. And then when you're finished, reassess the intensity, 1 to 10, and usually it'll come down 1 or 2 points, maybe 3. Sometimes I've had it go where I was at a 10 and I'm at a 1 after just 1 round of tapping. It happens. Sometimes you have to keep working at it. Being more specific is more helpful. Again, I think I mentioned that earlier. If you're going to be real global, it's hard to change when you're like, oh, let's just change everything, right? No, I want to change this one thing right here. Much easier to change something specific. So being specific is helpful. And if the intensity doesn't come down as much as you want it to, repeat, just do it again. Even though I continue to have this problem, and describe what the problem is. I'm okay and all is well. I continue to have this issue. I'm okay and all is well. Even though I still am having problems with whatever you're talking about, I'm okay and all is well. This continuing issue, this continuing, right? Just keep working your way through. Okay. So we'll get to that in just a second. I'm going to stop sharing that with you for a moment. So let's talk about, like, how do you use this? Where would you actually do this in your life? And really anywhere. Gary Craig was the guy who said, try it on anything and everything, because you just never know. And what I find the most, I'm a mind body person, right? That's where my passion lies. That's my expertise. I have worked with people and their bodies over the years. And I've noticed, this is why I got excited about this, is that I said, gosh, people are having tightness in the same areas. It's not because they went and hurt themselves doing anything. It's just tension that they're holding on to. So I started to do some researching and reading and learning and educating myself on what was exactly going on. And it became very clear to me that we all have sort of that Achilles heel, canary in the coal mine point in our body, that when we get stressed, when we're in fight, flight, or freeze, and remember, the freeze part is the trouble, because fight or flight, we can do something about it. Our body has a natural reaction, and then we get to disperse all of that energy by running or by fighting. But most of the time in the modern world, we can't do either one of those things, right? Hitting and punching our way or yelling, running away our way out of an issue or a situation isn't going to fix the problem. It's actually probably going to make it worse. And so we know that, right? We want to hold on to the relationship. We need to keep the job. We want to be a better parent or spouse or partner, and not say the terrible thing that comes to mind. And so we shut ourselves down, we freeze. And when we're in that freeze mode, that energy that we would have used to run or to fight gets trapped in our bodies. It's stuck. It has nowhere to go. We don't do anything with it. If you look at field mouse, when it's out in the field, it's running around, all of a sudden it senses the shadow of a hawk, it freezes, because it knows it can't run away. It can't fight the hawk, so it freezes. And it does all the things that we've talked about, shallow breathing, tight muscles, everything's. But when it knows that the danger has passed, if you were to be able to observe it, it would start to shake. It would just, its whole body would just tremble, letting go of all of that excess energy. And in our modern world, we don't do that. If we could be like the field mouse, that would be great. But we don't let it go. And it seems to be constant, where the hawk just keeps flying over, right? We can't seem to get a break sometimes. So that's where the tapping really comes in handy. So I invite you to notice where in your body you are feeling some intensity, right? So I have another poll question for you. I'd like you to, if Misty can throw that one up for us, please. And let's just give that a little bit of thought here. I'd like you to see where in your body, when you're stressed, where do you feel that? All right, so sometimes people feel it on their head. It might be a headache. It might just be a tightness. Your vision might get weird. So anything around your head, shoulders, tight shoulders, restriction in your chest or difficulty breathing. You might get a stomach that's all turned up, or you get knots in it and feel like you can't eat anything. Your glutes, your glutes might get tight, your hips or your legs. So take a moment and just kind of choose where do you notice most often when you're under stress? Where do you feel it in your body? And sometimes this is a new concept to people. They've never really thought about, like, they know that their shoulder's tight, but they never thought to connect it to, oh, I'm stressed. And I was one of those people. I was working on all of this, and I kept having this, and learning all these things and working with people, and I kept having this pain in my hip. And I was like, what's going on there? What's going on there? And finally, maybe I should do the thing I tell other people to do. And I looked at it and I'm like, I wonder if this is related to stress. And so I used tapping on it. Okay, so let's get the results here. All right, shoulders. Yes, I am so not surprised by that. As a massage therapist, just about everybody has tight shoulders, and often tight shoulders lead to problems with your head as well, because those muscles are connected in your neck. They all attach back here to the base of your occiput of your skull, and then attaches into all of these muscles. So all of that gets tight. Your chest, yep, that's common. Stomach is a really common one. I've experienced that one before. Glutes, hips, some people in their legs as well. Yeah, those shoulders are just, they're rough, aren't they? Okay, so we'll play with that in a second here. So the first thing to notice is, where am I carrying tension? And I like to use the tapping with that aspect of it, because when we're having a physical pain, it's often connected to an emotional pain. There's something, a stress, right? Emotional pain, stress. So there's a great book, and it's in my list of reading that I'll show you later. It's called The Genie in Your Genes by Dawson Church, PhD. And he tells this story that I just want to read you real quickly here. So he says, patients with pain don't just have pain. They also have many emotions connected to the pain. I once worked with a man on crutches. He'd broken his leg in an auto accident 2 weeks before. His pain was an 8 on a scale of 0 to 10. I frankly did not believe that EFT, meridian tapping, would be effective because it seemed a purely physical injury. Yet it turned out to have many emotional components. He was angry at the driver of the other car, who'd been in a car accident. He was upset at the doctor and at the hospital. He was mad at his wife, who'd insisted that they drive to an event he didn't want to attend. He was angry at himself for all the times he'd done things he didn't want to do starting in childhood. And we tapped it all away. When we were finished, his pain had gone down to a 2. That was his actual level of physical pain. The other 6 points were emotional overlay. And so I think that's just really, really fascinating. And I've noticed that in my patients. I've noticed it in my own body, that I'm not saying that tapping is going to fix your broken leg. It's not. We need modern medicine. This is not a replacement for it at all. But as you could see by that example, there's so much emotion that's connected to the physical things that happen to us. And if we can tap away that component, then instead of dealing with an 8-level pain, we're living with maybe a 2-level pain, which is the actual physical pain from the physical injury. So really, really interesting stuff, I think. And it's a fun and fascinating way to play with this. So I always, as a mind-body person, I start with the physical, and I look to, okay, where am I feeling pain in my body? Where is my patient feeling pain in their body? And how do we address that, right? I always check with people first, did you fall? Did you injure yourself? And we address that piece of it. But there's usually at least some emotional component to it. And oftentimes I get people coming into my practice where they say, oh my gosh, my shoulder just started hurting, my neck. I don't know if I slept on it funny, something happened. It's been bugging me for a couple of weeks. And so I first ask them, did you injure it? Did you do anything? Did you fall or whatever? And if they say no, my next question is always, okay, well, what was going on in your life when this first showed up? And almost to a person, they will come up with a stressful emotional situation that was going on at the time. And so then I invite them just to look at, maybe there's a connection here. What if we explore that, right? So we don't ignore the physical pain. I still work with them on that, but we do look at what's that emotional component. And that's where I think this can be most valuable for you, is that you can notice where you're feeling stress in your body and then use the tapping. So what I'd like to do here is let's do a little tapping routine for tight shoulders. Most people said, I've got tight shoulders. And here's the beauty of this, is if you tap along with us, even if you don't have tight shoulders, or even if you're not feeling them right now, go ahead and tap anyways. Do the tapping, say the words, repeat after me, and you will get what we call borrowing benefits. You will actually see a reduction in whatever your physical pain was, even if it wasn't your shoulders. The alternative is that when I say something about the shoulders, you can just in your mind or out loud replace it with what your issue is. So either way, you're going to get some benefit out of it. All right, you guys ready? Okay. So let's do this. I'm going to actually take my glasses off for this. It's a little easier than trying to tap around them. And so we're going to start off. Remember, we start off with the karate chop point or rubbing one or both of the sore spots. And we talk about the problem 3 different times. Then we tap through the points with a reminder phrase, or we continue to talk about the problem. So we're going to do tight shoulders. So even though I have these tight shoulders, repeat after me. It really hurts. It's even making my head hurt. Feels like my shoulders are up to my ears, but I'm okay and all is well. Second time. Even though I have this pain in my shoulders, it feels like a pinching, tight, really painful sensation in my shoulders, but I'm okay and all is well. Notice that I'm really trying to describe specifically. So even though I have this pain in my shoulders, it's particularly bad here on the right side. It feels like somebody's trying to give me a Vulcan death grip. pinching so hard, it's so tight, but I'm okay, and I am, and all is well. Now we come around to the points, beginning of the eyebrow. There's pain in my shoulder, side of the eye. It feels like someone's squeezing it so hard. Again, if you feel inclined to take a deep breath, go for it. That's your body talking to you. Come under the eye. This pain in my shoulder, it's so intense. It's a number 8 out of 10. Underneath the nose. It's so painful, it kind of makes my stomach hurt. Under the chin, this pain in my shoulders. It's hard to focus on doing anything else. It hurts so much. Collarbones. It's pain in my shoulder. It's pinching, it's tight. It's taking all of my attention. Under the arm, this pain in my shoulder. It's an 8 out of 10. Top of the head, this pain in my shoulder right there. So tight. It's making me nauseous. Let's go around one more time. I'm just going to switch. Well, and then the audio is weird. I'll switch to keep going on this side. But you can switch if you want. Doesn't matter. This pain in my shoulders. We're going to do one more round. It feels so tight. Under the eye, I feel like my shoulders are up at my ears. Under the nose, it feels like they can't possibly get any tighter. Under the chin, this tightness in my shoulders is unbearable. This pain is exhausting. This tightness in my shoulders making me short with the people I work with, the people I love. This pain is just sapping all of my energy. This pain in my shoulder. And I always end on the wrists. Nice deep breath. Pause. Let's take one more, just nice deep breath. And now notice how you're feeling. Now I did something that I do all the time, and I always forget to assess the number beforehand, so you probably picked up that I assigned it an 8 partway through the process. You can do that. So if you did have shoulder pain and you did assign it a number, check and see what that number is again now. All right. Now, how many of you, give me a raise of hands, saw a difference there? Did you see a difference in your shoulders feeling better? All right. Yeah. Takes a second to find that, that little raise the hand thing, right? Okay. Now, those of you who, so let's clear that out. Those of you who had a something other than your shoulder that was bugging you, but you tapped along with us, how many of you saw a change? Give me a hands up. Okay, good. So some of you were trying it for something different. Good, good. Yeah, that's always the challenge of doing it in a group is you can't hit everybody at the same time. But like I said, that borrowing benefits concept really does make a difference. And okay, that's great. So we'll close that out. So a lot of you saw a difference here. Now, some of the reasons, like I said before, that you aren't going to notice a difference is if you weren't being specific enough. So keep trying it. If you want to be more specific, you can try it again. And so that's really the physical use, using it for physical symptoms is really where I come from, because that's just my background, right? And just to give you an example, though, one particular story that sticks out in my mind that made such a difference is, let me back up for a second. Oftentimes when you start to focus on the emotional or the physical piece of things, the emotions show up. Right? So there's a connection. You may not always be aware of what it is that's stressing you, or even that you are stressed. You just notice your body hurts. That's why I call it the canary in the coal mine, or the Achilles heel piece of our bodies, that it's saying, hey, pay attention, Wendy, you're hurting. Something's going on. You're stressed out. and your body is giving you physical pain because you're not paying attention to any of the other signals that it's trying to give you. So it says, all right, well, I'm going to get your attention by making, in my case, your hip hurt. So those of you who joined me last time, I talked about how I have this pain in my right hip. It feels like somebody's digging in and then twisting, right? Like, it's very, very painful. It makes it difficult for me to walk. And there was this one time where this was just so dramatic that I think it's a great story to share. So I teach presentation skills to business executives as part of my other business. And I had a new client. I was working with Culver's and I was like, okay, new client, big customer, want to make sure this goes well. And it was something I'd done a million times, but you know how that is, you do something new. So it was kind of a positive stress, but it was still stress. And I did 2 days of teaching on my feet a lot too. So my legs were just, physically tired. And I was really I could feel my hip was getting much more stiff. Well, that afternoon, after I finished teaching, I needed to drive down to Chicago, and I was picking up my daughter she'd flying in from visiting my son who was in college, down to Chicago. I was going to pick her up at the airport. And then since I had to pick her up, we were going to just do some shopping for a prom dress. She was in high school at the time. And we're like, oh, let's go see if there's some fun ones, on the Magnificent Mile. And that'll be a fun little mother-daughter trip. So I'm driving down there to do that. And as I'm driving, I am getting more and more uncomfortable. I'm thinking, I don't know how I'm going to walk around up and down Michigan Avenue and in and out of stores and be pleasant when I feel like I'm 95 years old and I have broken my hip and can't even function. It was really quite severe. And I'm like, what am I going to do? We have this thing set up. I don't want to be that mom who can't show up and be there and all of that. And so I thought, what the heck? I'm just driving to Chicago. What else do I have to do? I'll tap. So I kept one hand on the steering wheel and I had it on cruise. And it wasn't in heavy traffic. I'll just stipulate that. I don't recommend doing this in traffic or while you're driving, but in this case, I kind of needed to. And so I just started tapping. So I was holding on to it. In this case, I was hitting the steering wheel with the side of my hand. And even though I have this pain in my hip, and I described it, it feels tight, it feels pinching, it feels pulling. And as I started to do it, I realized how stressed I was and why I was stressed. And so I was able to start talking about it, like, wow, I was really nervous about teaching and it went really well, but boy, I had to be on and that was stressful. And now I'm driving this whole way and I'm kind of tired. And so I was just talking about what was present, both physically, and I started to become aware of what was going on emotionally. And I tapped my way through that. And I only had to do a couple of rounds of tapping through all the points. And then, and this is really important when you're dealing with physical things, I felt this urge to stretch and move. So you got to move those muscles that are tight. And so, like I said, I had it on cruise. So I just stretched out my right leg away from the thing and I reached up to the top of the car and just did this huge full body stretch on the right side. Took a nice deep breath, and I am not kidding you at all. I went from a 9 out of 10 of pain down to nothing. My hip didn't hurt at all anymore. And when I got out of the car, I was like, let's go. We can jog up and down Michigan Avenue. I'm good, right? So, and it amazes me because I've learned that hip is where I hold stress and tension. And so it's crazy. The first few times I did it, I kept saying, how is this even working? This doesn't even, it's too good to be true, right? But it does. So I invite you to use this tool as much as you can on anything. Try it with the physical stuff. Recognize that physical and emotional are also very much connected. And I'd like to leave you here with looking at some of these resources, because there's so much more that we could talk about and do. And we're limited, right? I could sit here and talk to you for days about this, but you don't need that. I'll let you do some of your own research. So here's some recommended reading that I have. The EFT Handbook by Gary Craig, who we talked about earlier. It's just a real basic, good primer for it. The Genie in Your Genes, that's this book that I shared with you here today. Fascinating, lots of science and interesting stuff in it, but also very approachable. The Biology of Belief, which is by Bruce Lipton. He actually used to be here at the UW at one point in his career. And also a lot of science in there, but also pretty accessible. If you've had any high school science classes, you can probably find your way through that. And Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert. She's done a lot of work on this connection between the emotions and the physical aspect of who we are as human beings. And David Feinstein's The Promise of Energy Psychology. He is very much into the meridian tapping and has done a lot of research with it. So these are some of the big names, really interesting. These are all books that I had to read when I did my training, and I highly recommend them. And then here's some tapping resources, right? So it's one thing for me to say, yeah, here you go, let's go for it, right? This image that you see here on the right is from the Tapping Solution app. It is Nick Ortner and his sister Jessica wrote a book, The Tapping Solution, which actually is holding up my computer right now, or I would show it to you. And it is a very helpful book. It also is, this app is really nice. It's just right on your phone, and you can see that it lights up the different points that you should be tapping. It has you do the assessment, and it's available on Android or iPhone for free. There are lots of free tapping scripts for you to use. There are others that you can subscribe and pay more for, but a lot of the ones that they have for healthcare workers and frontline workers right now are free and available to people. You can also come and see me. I'm doing virtual mind-body appointments right now at Group Health on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I would love to work with you. Again, very mind-body focused, and those are a lot of fun. And we can actually get physical relief just by working virtually over a Zoom call like this. And then also EFTinternational.org is a place where you can go to find a provider who specializes in EFT. So I'm somebody who uses emotional freedom techniques or meridian tapping as one of many tools to manage stress in my practice. There are people who this is all of they do, and they're much more focused on things like helping you get over phobias and that kind of thing. So if that's what you're looking for, I would try to find a provider there. And again, they don't have to be local because this can all be done over the phone or over a Zoom call. So that's one of the beauties of the technique and of our technology. So these are some resources for you. I also have a tapping video on how to tap that Misty has and can send out to you again. And I also have a PDF of those cards of showing you how to do the process. So I will make sure that Misty has those for you to share those with you as well. So I'll just leave you with the thought that everything is energy. Your thought begins it, your emotion amplifies it, and your action increases the momentum. So I encourage you to use the action of tapping to short circuit those energy spikes that get going that are not serving you, that are showing up as pain in your body, that are a manifestation of your stress. So hopefully you understand now that you can tap your way to less stress. I hope you really have an appreciation for what tapping is, how it actually works in our bodies, and most importantly, how you can use it in your own life. So we are at, oh my gosh, we're a couple minutes after. I'm sorry about that. I'm happy to stay on if anybody has any questions to take some questions. Otherwise, we are complete and you're welcome to take off. Thank you very much for your time spending with me today. It is just truly a joy to be able to share the stuff that I'm so passionate about. Thanks, everybody. So if you have questions, go ahead and throw them in there and I will check them out here. Okay, great questions here. So is it important how hard or softly you tap? No, not at all. I would say somewhere in the middle is fine. Whatever's comfortable for you. You want to do it enough that you can feel it. I mean, if you're just barely touching, you may not stimulate those points, but you don't need to, bang on yourself. So just something, pretty whatever feels comfortable for you is the best way to put that. Handouts, are there handouts for the session and how do you get them? I'd like to use this. Yes, I believe, Misty, you sent those out in an email, correct?
Yes, so everybody will receive an email, comment email tomorrow. So if you would like any of these resources, please just reply back and I will make sure you get those. We'll also make sure that those resources are located on our website, Monona Terrace Wellness Talks too.
All right, thank you, Misty. And then while you were doing that, I went back to the page that shows the book list for the person, Melanie, who asked for that. Oh, glad you enjoyed it there, Amy and Susan. And let's see, Amy different, oh no, same Amy is asking, are the sore spots on the collarbone the same as the spots we tap? No, they are not. Those are two different things. So the spots that we tap on are the knobby part here. So if you come down your throat to the little hollow at the base of your neck, there's your collarbone, those little knobby parts of your collarbone. That's what you tap when you're tapping, you know, we're going through all the points. The sore spot is actually, if you go to those points, come 3 inches down and 3 inches out, it's more out here. Okay, that's the sore spot that you're going to rub, which is distinct from the K27 points that we tap here on the kidney meridian. All right, that answers that question. Great. I think that's all of our questions. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Please feel free to follow up if you have any more questions, and so glad that you could take the time to be here today. Y'all stay well.